Sometimes the most powerful revenge is your silence, not because you are weak, but because life eventually punishes what your words never could. One of the greatest misunderstandings in human relationships is the belief that silence means weakness. People often assume that if you do not react immediately, if you do not defend yourself loudly, or if you do not return insult for insult, then you must be afraid, defeated, or emotionally fragile. But true silence, the kind that comes from inner control, is not surrender at all. It is self-respect in its purest form. It is the decision to protect your peace instead of throwing it into the fire of someone else's immaturity. There is enormous strength in refusing to let another person control your emotions. Anyone can react in anger. Anyone can shout, insult, and lose themselves in a moment of pain. But remaining composed when you have every reason to explode requires discipline, wisdom, and emotional power that very few people possess. When someone disrespects you, your first instinct may be to defend yourself immediately. You want to explain your value. You want to prove them wrong. You want them to understand the damage they caused. But many people are not disrespectful because they misunderstood you. They are disrespectful because they have already chosen not to value you. And this is why arguing with certain people becomes emotionally exhausting. You keep searching for fairness in someone committed to unfairness. You keep expecting maturity from someone who survives on conflict. In those moments, silence becomes more than restraint. It becomes protection. It becomes the invisible boundary that says, I will not allow your chaos to enter my spirit. There are people who provoke others simply to feel powerful. They study emotional reactions because reactions feed their ego. The moment you lose control, they feel victorious. They may smile while you suffer. They may enjoy watching you defend yourself endlessly. This is why silence can disturb toxic people more than anger ever could. Your silence removes the satisfaction they were hoping to receive. It denies them emotional access to your peace. And when a person can no longer control your emotions, they begin to lose control over your presence in their life. Many individuals spend years believing they must explain themselves to everyone. They feel guilty for walking away quietly. They think maturity means endless tolerance. But self-respect changes your perspective completely. Self-respect teaches you that not every accusation deserves your defense. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every person deserves unlimited access to your energy. There comes a moment in life when you realize that constantly defending yourself drains your spirit more than the disrespect itself. You begin to understand that peace is expensive, and you cannot afford to waste it on people committed to misunderstanding you. Silence also reflects emotional intelligence. It shows that you understand the difference between temporary emotion and permanent consequence. Words spoken in anger often leave scars that cannot be repaired. One uncontrolled moment can destroy relationships, opportunities, reputations, and inner stability. But when you remain silent, you give yourself the space to think clearly instead of emotionally. You refuse to become a prisoner of the moment. You choose wisdom over impulse. And that choice protects your dignity in ways that shouting never will. Some of the strongest people in the world are quiet during disrespect, not because they lack confidence, but because they possess too much wisdom to fight meaningless battles. They know their value does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. A diamond does not become worthless because a blind person cannot see its brilliance. In the same way, your character does not lose its depth simply because someone chooses to insult you. The opinions of emotionally immature people should never become the measure of your worth. There is also a hidden confidence inside silence. When you stop needing to prove yourself to everyone, you begin to discover true inner freedom. You no longer feel desperate for validation. You no longer waste sleepless nights trying to convince people to respect you. You understand that respect forced through arguments is never genuine respect. Real respect is recognized naturally by people capable of seeing your value, and those who cannot see it are not worth sacrificing your peace for. Silence is difficult because the ego always wants the final word. The ego wants revenge, it wants recognition, it wants victory in front of others. But self-respect is greater than ego. Self-respect understands that some victories are invisible. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away without becoming cruel. Sometimes the greatest victory is remaining calm while someone desperately tries to pull you into emotional darkness. Sometimes the greatest victory is protecting your soul from becoming similar to the people who hurt you. One of the most painful mistakes people make is believing that the way others treat them defines their value. When someone insults you, ignores you, humiliates you, betrays you, or speaks to you without kindness, it is easy to internalize their behavior and quietly begin questioning yourself. You replay conversations in your mind. You wonder if you were not enough, intelligent enough, attractive enough, successful enough, or worthy enough. Slowly, another person's cruelty starts becoming a mirror through which you see yourself. But this is where emotional suffering begins, because disrespect is rarely an accurate reflection of the person receiving it. More often, it is a reflection of the person giving it. The behavior people choose during moments of power, frustration, jealousy, or disagreement reveals the condition of their character far more than it reveals anything about yours. A person with inner peace does not feel the need to humiliate others. Someone who genuinely respects themselves does not search for opportunities to diminish another human being. Emotionally healthy individuals understand that kindness costs nothing and dignity should never be weaponized. So when someone constantly disrespects others, mocks them, manipulates them, or tries to make them feel small, they are exposing the emptiness within themselves. Their behavior becomes a public display of unresolved insecurity, emotional immaturity, bitterness, or envy. People often think disrespect is strength because it appears loud and aggressive, but true strength is calm, controlled, and secure. Cruelty is usually the mask worn by people who are deeply uncomfortable with themselves. There are individuals who cannot tolerate seeing confidence, peace, talent, or authenticity in others because it reminds them of what they lack within themselves. Instead of improving their own lives, they attempt to damage the confidence of those around them. They criticize your dreams because they abandoned their own. They mock your happiness because they cannot create happiness within themselves. They attack your progress because your growth forces them to confront their stagnation. In these situations, disrespect becomes a confession. Without realizing it, they reveal their fears, frustrations, and emotional wounds through the way they treat you. This is why emotionally intelligent people stop taking every insult personally. They begin to observe behavior differently. Instead of immediately absorbing someone's negativity, they ask deeper questions. What kind of person enjoys hurting others unnecessarily? What kind of pain must exist inside someone who constantly creates conflict? What kind of emptiness drives a person to seek power through humiliation? These questions shift your perspective completely. Suddenly, you stop viewing disrespect as proof of your inadequacy and start recognizing it as evidence of another person's unresolved darkness. Many people carry hidden emotional damage from childhood, failed relationships, rejection, insecurity, or personal disappointment. Instead of healing those wounds, they project them onto others. Projection is one of the most common forms of human behavior. A dishonest person accuses others of betrayal. An insecure person constantly criticizes others. A jealous person minimizes the achievements of those around them. A person filled with self-hatred often spreads negativity everywhere they go. They are not responding to who you truly are. They are responding to the internal battles they have never learned to confront within themselves. Understanding this truth protects your self-worth. It prevents you from carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to begin with. Imagine walking through life accepting every insult as truth. Eventually, you would become emotionally exhausted, constantly shaped by the opinions of unstable people. But once you realize that disrespect often reflects the emotional condition of the other person, you begin to detach from unnecessary pain. You stop allowing wounded individuals to define your identity. This does not mean disrespect should be tolerated endlessly. Understanding someone's brokenness does not require accepting abuse. Compassion and boundaries must exist together. You can recognize someone's inner pain while still refusing to allow them access to your peace. In fact, one of the highest forms of self-respect is understanding that another person's behavior is not your responsibility to fix. Many people destroy themselves trying to heal individuals who are committed to remaining toxic. They become emotionally drained because they believe love, patience, or understanding will eventually change someone who has no desire to grow. There is freedom in realizing that you do not need universal approval to possess value. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how pure your intentions are. Some people will dislike you simply because your presence challenges their insecurities. Some people will disrespect you because they are incapable of offering others the respect they do not even possess within themselves. And once you truly understand this, you stop shrinking yourself to gain acceptance from emotionally unhealthy individuals. You stop begging for recognition from people blinded by jealousy, pride, or bitterness. You begin to protect your inner world with greater wisdom because you finally understand that another person's inability to see your worth does not erase the worth that already exists within you. One of the most important yet least understood truths in human behavior is that emotional reactions are a form of currency, and in the presence of toxic individuals, that currency becomes power. The more emotionally reactive you are, the more control you unknowingly hand over to people who thrive on disruption, conflict, and psychological instability. Toxic individuals do not always seek physical control. Many of them seek emotional influence. They want access to your reactions because your reactions validate their ability to affect you. The moment you lose emotional balance, they gain a sense of superiority, even if only temporarily. This is why some people deliberately provoke others, not to resolve anything, but to observe how easily they can shift someone's emotional state. When a person is calm, grounded, and emotionally centered, they become significantly harder to manipulate. Toxic behavior loses its effectiveness when it fails to produce a reaction. However, when anger, frustration, sadness, or panic is triggered, the situation changes entirely. Suddenly, the focus is no longer on the original issue, but on your emotional response. The toxic person now has something to work with, something to exploit, something to twist. Your reaction becomes the center of attention, and the original disrespect becomes secondary. This shift is subtle but extremely powerful because it moves control away from facts and into emotions. Many people mistakenly believe that reacting strongly proves strength or self-respect. They think that raising their voice, defending themselves aggressively, or responding immediately shows that they will not tolerate disrespect. In reality, excessive emotional reaction often achieves the opposite effect. It signals vulnerability. It signals that your internal state can be easily influenced, and anyone who can influence your internal state can, in a way, influence your decisions, your energy, and your peace of mind. Toxic individuals are highly observant of this pattern. They learn quickly who is easily triggered and who remains steady under pressure. There is a strategic advantage in emotional restraint. When you do not immediately react, you create distance between stimulus and response. In that space, clarity develops. You begin to see the situation for what it truly is rather than what it feels like in the moment. Toxic individuals often rely on immediacy. They want instant reactions because time weakens emotional intensity. When you delay your response or choose silence, you disrupt their expectation. You remove the immediate gratification they were seeking. This interruption alone can shift the power dynamic significantly. Emotional reactions also tend to escalate situations unnecessarily. A small insult can become a heated argument. A misunderstanding can turn into a prolonged conflict. A minor provocation can evolve into emotional exhaustion that lasts far longer than the original interaction. Toxic people often benefit from this escalation because chaos creates confusion, and confusion creates opportunity for manipulation. In a calm environment, manipulation is harder to sustain. In an emotionally charged environment, truth becomes distorted and perception becomes unstable. This instability is where toxic behavior thrives most effectively. There is also a psychological element at play. When you react emotionally, you unconsciously confirm that the other person has touched something sensitive within you. They may not know exactly what that sensitivity is, but they recognize its existence. This recognition often encourages further provocation. It becomes a cycle where each reaction invites another attempt. Over time, this cycle can drain emotional energy, weaken confidence, and create unnecessary dependency on external validation or defense. On the other hand, emotional control communicates something entirely different. It communicates stability. It communicates self-awareness. It communicates that your inner world is not easily shaken by external behavior. This does not mean suppression of emotions, nor does it mean denial of feelings. It means choosing when and where to express them in a way that protects your dignity rather than exposing your vulnerability to those who may misuse it. Emotional intelligence is not the absence of feeling. It is the discipline of managing feeling without allowing it to dictate immediate action in moments designed to provoke instability. Over time, individuals who master emotional restraint notice a shift in how others interact with them. People who rely on drama or manipulation often lose interest because there is no emotional reward in targeting someone who does not react impulsively. Conversations become more respectful. Boundaries become more apparent. The space around them becomes less chaotic, not because others changed, but because the emotional fuel that once sustained toxic dynamics is no longer available, leaving interactions to settle into quieter patterns where influence becomes significantly reduced. One of the most difficult lessons for people to accept is that justice in life does not always arrive immediately. Human beings are naturally impatient when they are hurt. When someone disrespects us, betrays us, lies to us, or takes advantage of our kindness, there is an internal desire for instant correction. We want to see balance restored quickly. We want consequences to appear in real time so that the pain feels justified. But life does not operate according to emotional urgency. It operates according to timing, circumstance, and consequences that unfold in ways that are often invisible at first. This is where the idea of karma becomes both misunderstood and deeply powerful. Karma does not always appear as dramatic punishment. It often works quietly, gradually, and in ways that only become clear over time. When people act without integrity, they often believe they have escaped consequences simply because nothing immediate happens to them. They continue their behavior, convinced that their actions have no cost. But life has a long memory. Every choice creates an effect, even if that effect is delayed. Every action plants a seed, even if the harvest does not appear right away. People often mistake delay for absence, assuming that silence from life means approval. In reality, silence is often just preparation. The consequences are forming in ways that are not immediately visible, building through relationships, trust, reputation, and internal psychological states that gradually shift over time. Those who repeatedly disrespect others begin to shape their own environment without realizing it. Trust becomes harder for them to access. Genuine relationships become more difficult to maintain. Opportunities that require reliability start to disappear. Even if they appear successful on the surface, the foundation beneath that success often becomes unstable. Over time, people begin to distance themselves, not necessarily in dramatic confrontations, but in quiet withdrawals. Respect is slowly replaced by caution. Connection is slowly replaced by distance, and eventually they find themselves surrounded by fewer people who genuinely care about their presence. Karma is not always external. Sometimes it is internal. A person may achieve material success while slowly losing peace of mind. They may gain status while losing emotional stability. They may win arguments while losing meaningful relationships. They may appear powerful while quietly struggling with emptiness that no achievement can fully fill. These internal consequences are often the most difficult to recognize because they do not produce immediate visible collapse. Instead, they accumulate gradually, shaping the emotional experience of a person's life in ways that cannot be easily measured. There is also a natural balance in human relationships that many people underestimate. The energy you give to others tends to return in some form, not necessarily from the same person or in the same situation, but in patterns that life consistently repeats. A person who repeatedly creates pain will eventually encounter pain in forms they cannot control. A person who consistently builds trust will eventually experience trust being returned to them in meaningful ways. This is not mystical thinking. It is the natural result of behavior shaping reputation and reputation shaping opportunities. One of the most important aspects of karma is that it does not require your participation. When someone hurts you, your instinct may be to become the instrument of their consequence. But involvement in revenge often binds you to the same cycle you are trying to escape. Karma functions independently of emotional interference. It does not need anger, retaliation, or manipulation. It operates through time, choices, and the natural unfolding of outcomes that stem from behavior itself. This is why people who try to force justice often exhaust themselves, while those who step back eventually witness outcomes they did not need to create. There is also a psychological relief that comes from understanding this principle deeply. It allows you to release the burden of immediate justice. Instead of carrying resentment, you begin to trust that actions carry their own weight. This does not mean becoming passive or ignoring boundaries. It means recognizing that not every injustice requires your direct involvement to be corrected. Some situations resolve themselves through the consequences embedded within the actions of those who caused harm in the first place. Over time, individuals who consistently operate with disrespect often find themselves in cycles that repeat similar patterns. They lose trust, then attempt to rebuild it. They damage relationships, then struggle to repair them. They create conflict, then find themselves surrounded by conflict. These repetitions are not random. They are the natural reflection of accumulated behavior returning in forms that mirror its origin. Meanwhile, those who choose restraint, dignity, and emotional discipline often find their lives becoming more stable, more peaceful, and more aligned with people who value integrity. One of the most misunderstood forms of strength in human interaction is the ability to walk away without trying to win. Most people are conditioned to believe that victory must be loud, visible, and validated through argument. From a young age, they are taught that proving a point is essential, that being right must always be defended, and that silence in the face of conflict is equivalent to defeat. But life eventually reveals a deeper truth. Not every argument deserves your participation, and not every confrontation deserves your energy. There are moments when leaving in peace requires far more strength than staying to fight for recognition in a situation that was never designed for understanding in the first place. When people engage in arguments driven by disrespect, ego often becomes the primary force guiding the interaction. The conversation stops being about truth and becomes about dominance. Each side is no longer listening to understand, but speaking to win. In such environments, clarity disappears. Words become weapons, and communication becomes a contest of emotional endurance rather than mutual understanding. In these moments, even if you are correct, the act of trying to prove your correctness can cost you more than the argument is worth. Emotional energy is consumed, patience is tested, and inner peace begins to erode under the weight of unnecessary engagement. Walking away in peace is not avoidance, it is discernment. It is the ability to recognize when a situation has crossed the boundary of meaningful dialogue and entered the territory of emotional exhaustion. Many people continue arguing long after the possibility of resolution has disappeared, not because they believe progress is possible, but because they are attached to the idea of being acknowledged as right. This attachment often leads to prolonged suffering. The need for validation becomes heavier than the desire for peace, and in the process, individuals lose more of themselves than they gain from any verbal victory. There is also a profound difference between being understood and being consumed by misunderstanding. Some people are not listening to understand you, they are listening to respond, criticize, or invalidate. No amount of explanation will satisfy someone who has already decided not to see your perspective. Continuing to argue in such cases does not create clarity, it deepens frustration. The more effort you put into convincing them, the more emotionally entangled you become in a situation that was never built for resolution. Walking away interrupts this cycle. It removes you from a dynamic where your words no longer hold constructive value. Peaceful withdrawal also preserves dignity. In heated arguments, people often say things they do not truly mean, simply to regain control or defend their position. Once spoken, those words cannot be taken back. They linger in memory, sometimes damaging relationships beyond repair. By choosing to step away instead of escalating conflict, you protect not only your emotional stability but also your long-term integrity. You avoid becoming someone who reacts impulsively in ways that contradict your true character. There is a quiet power in refusing to engage with chaos. When you walk away from an argument that is built on disrespect, you send a message that your energy is not available for misuse. You stop feeding the situation with attention, and in doing so, you remove its ability to grow. Many conflicts survive because both sides continue to participate. When one side chooses not to engage further, the conflict loses momentum. This does not mean the issue is resolved, but it does mean that you are no longer trapped inside it. People often underestimate how much internal strength is required to leave a situation without needing the final word. The ego constantly demands closure through victory. It wants acknowledgement, confirmation, and superiority, but emotional maturity recognizes that some battles do not lead to meaningful outcomes, no matter how convincingly they are argued. In such moments, choosing peace over victory becomes a higher form of intelligence. It reflects an understanding that protecting your emotional well-being is more important than winning a verbal exchange that carries no lasting benefit. Over time, individuals who adopt this mindset begin to notice a transformation in their lives. Conflicts lose their grip on them more quickly. Arguments no longer drain them as deeply. They become less reactive and more selective about what deserves their attention. Their energy becomes more stable because it is no longer constantly invested in defending themselves against every challenge or provocation. Walking away in peace becomes not just an action, but a way of preserving inner clarity in a world that often encourages unnecessary confrontation. In a world that often rewards noise, visibility, and constant self-promotion, it is easy to assume that the loudest voices are the strongest. Many people equate speaking more with having more power and reacting faster with having more control. But life, over time, reveals a different pattern. that is far less obvious in the moment. The people who speak the least are often the ones who understand the most. The individuals who do not rush to defend themselves in every situation are often the ones building something far more stable beneath the surface. The quiet person is not absent from the battle, they are simply engaged in a different kind of battle, one that is not immediately visible to others, but unfolds with depth, patience, and long-term awareness. Quiet strength is often misunderstood because it does not demand attention. It does not seek validation through constant explanation or emotional display. Instead, it operates through observation, restraint, and careful decision-making. While others may be caught in cycles of reaction, argument, and emotional turbulence, the quiet person is often analyzing patterns, understanding intentions, and recognizing outcomes before they fully develop. This ability to see beyond the immediate moment gives them an advantage that is not based on speed, but on clarity. They do not rush to respond because they are not trying to win temporary moments. They are focused on long-term positioning. The longest battles in life are rarely won through intensity alone. They are won through consistency, emotional discipline, and the ability to remain grounded while circumstances shift. Many people lose these battles not because they lack intelligence or capability, but because they exhaust themselves early through unnecessary emotional engagement. They react too quickly, speak too much, and reveal too many of their internal states to people who may not have their best interests in mind. In contrast, the quiet person preserves energy. They understand that not every situation requires immediate response and not every challenge requires visible confrontation. There is also a strategic advantage in being underestimated. Quiet individuals are often misjudged because they do not constantly display their thoughts or intentions. Others may assume they are passive, unaware, or indifferent, but beneath that surface is often a deeply aware and observant mind. While people around them may be revealing their motivations openly through words and reactions, the quiet person is gathering information silently. They are not distracted by the need to prove themselves in every moment, which allows them to maintain a broader understanding of the situation as it evolves. Over time, this approach creates a form of stability that reactive behavior cannot sustain. Emotional reactions tend to create cycles of escalation, where each response demands another response. Quiet observation, however, breaks this cycle. It introduces space, and in that space, clarity emerges. When clarity emerges, decisions become more precise. Instead of reacting to pressure, the quiet person responds based on understanding. This difference may seem small in the moment, but over the long term it becomes decisive. The idea of winning the longest battle is not about defeating others in a traditional sense. It is about endurance, emotional control, and the ability to remain aligned with one's values even when provoked. Many conflicts in life are not resolved through immediate confrontation, but through time revealing the truth. Lies eventually lose consistency. Manipulation eventually exposes itself. Insincerity eventually becomes visible through patterns of behavior. The quiet person does not need to force these revelations. They allow time and consistency to do the work. Another important aspect of quiet strength is self-preservation. Constant engagement in conflict drains emotional and mental resources. People who feel the need to respond to everything often find themselves mentally exhausted, unable to focus on personal growth or long-term goals. The quiet individual avoids this depletion by choosing where to invest their energy. They understand that attention is a limited resource, and once it is spent on unnecessary battles, it cannot be recovered. This awareness allows them to maintain focus on what truly matters rather than being pulled into every emotional disturbance around them. In the end, the quiet person's strength is not immediately recognized because it does not rely on external validation. It grows internally steadily, and often invisibly to others. While louder voices may dominate short-term situations, quiet consistency shapes long-term outcomes. Over time, situations tend to reveal who was reactive and who was observant, who was driven by impulse and who was guided by understanding, who burned energy quickly and who conserved it for the moments that truly mattered.